Well, greetings, everyone. Greetings. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. And I am so happy that you have joined us today for our monthly webinar. And we'll get started shortly. So, y'all just sit back and relax, and we'll be right with you with our webinar How to Research and Move a Policy Target. Hello, 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 everyone. Y'all come on in the room, get situated, because we are in for a wonderful webinar today. Yes, we have some heavy hitters in the house. Some people I really look up to facilitate the trainings today. Just come on in, come on in, come on in. Well, greetings again, everybody. Come in. Thank you for sharing space with us this evening. And I'm excited. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm excited. Let me see. Hey, Catherine. Hello. Kimberly, hello. That Miss
Hello, how are
Wanda.
you?
Always good to see you. Cardella, glad you're here. I'm doing okay. I've had a very eventful couple of days. I went to the Policymakers Academy, and it was very engaging. I learned a lot. Listened to some legislators from Tennessee and Texas. And I was kind of downhearted because I didn't see any legislators from Alabama. So, so once again, we're at the bottom of the totem pole. Is Millicent. Hello, Millicent. Glad you're here. Zena. And if I miss anybody, y'all charge it to my head and my failing eyesight, aging with HIV. Shelby, glad you're here. Miss
Oh,
Jackson, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. That cave with the Disability Rights Education Defense Fund. We're so glad that you're here, even though I probably slayed your name. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Yes, I got a chance to make a little style. You can't see it because we're blurred. But it says, I support HIV prevention because the next generation is depending on us. And they are. And they really are. It's time to rise up and do something, I'm at a point in my life where I just can't sit back and be okay with what's going on. Yeah. Somebody did it for me. So, and I'm truly grateful for that. Okay. Welcome, Nakesia, David. Glad you're here. I know I missed a lot of people, but I'm having to kind of uh, check the messages. Okay. Well, once again, welcome everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our eighth webinar entitled How to Research and Move a Policy Target. We are so glad that you're here. So glad that you're here. So get ready for a treat. But first, let's have some logistics. Okay, and they're pretty much always the same. This is being recorded. Now, you can enable closed captioning if you choose, and please share questions in the chat. You can also raise your hand, and we'll take questions at the end of the both sessions, both of the trainings. Um, we are in meeting mode on Zoom, so you can mute and unmute yourself by using *6 or the mute button on your phone. Okay. Okay, the Positive Women's Network. Now, we are the only national membership body created by and for cisgender and transgender women, gender diverse people, and transgender people living with HIV. Since 2008, our members have created a unified voice and built collective power for women, gender diverse, and trans people living with HIV. We believe that racial and gender justice cannot be divested from the HIV response and ground our work in collective liberation. PWN is creating a world where all women, gender diverse, and trans people living with HIV can live long, healthy, and dignified lives free from stigma, discrimination, and criminalization. Now, our policy fellowship web series is a year-long program designed to support cis and trans women, transgender and gender diverse people living with HIV to build skills and experience in policy and advocacy. We are acutely aware that we are launching in the midst of escalating fascism and state terror in the US and abroad. We have structured this year participants more tools to respond to the new and emerging threats with trusted and emerging strategies. The goals and objectives. By the time we are finished today, participants will learn some best practices in researching a policy target and learn how to build and maintain relationships with policymakers. And we cannot stress enough how important those relationships are with the people who are creating these policies that's going to affect us. We cannot stress that enough. The agenda. Okay, the welcome and introduction. And once again, we welcome you all into this space. After, we'll have questions and answers. And then we'll have a call to action, and we will close out in our usual fashion. Now, our speakers, I told you today, we have some powerhouses in on this webinar. Barb Cardell, who is PWN USA Leadership and Development Director. She's a longtime advocate, been in the field and for like forever, probably since she was a baby, Barb. And I just love her to death. And also Sallie Thomas, PWN USA's policy specialist in decriminalization. And Sallie, she is one of my favorite all-time people. She is the subject matter expert in her field. And when I was part of the policy fellowship in year 5, I would not have made it through that without her help. And those are our presenters for today, Bob Cardell and Sallie Thomas.
Thank you so much, Myra. I'm realizing that we forgot to put pronouns on this slide, so I'm so sorry. I just wanted to tell everyone, Barb uses they, them pronouns, and Sallie uses she, her pronouns. And I'm back to you, Myra.
Okay. Okay. So, and now at this time, we will turn it over to Sallie Thomas, the decriminalization specialist with the Positive Women's Network. Sallie?
Thanks, Myra. And love you too. Hey, everyone. I'm Sallie. Like Myra said, I'm the HIV decrim specialist at Positive Women's Network. And today we're just going to dig into how to research a policy target. And then later on, Barb will follow up with how to move a policy target and build relationships. So specifically, like how to identify and engage with the people who hold power over your issue. Next slide, please. I'll share some quick learning objectives. So our goal today is to define what a policy target is, and then learn later, Barb will mention how to build relationships, but we'll also dig into primary and secondary policy targets and researching policy targets. Next slide, please. I figured we should start really simple with what is a policy target. If any of you have heard of a policy target before, drop an emoji. I would just love to see who all has heard of this term before. Okay, cool. See some hearts, some thumbs. Very cool. So what do we mean by policy target? Essentially, it's the person or entity that can actually make your policy change happen. I know that on your last webinar, you had Ebony talking to you about effective organizing. And when you're organizing around an issue. The policy target piece comes in after you've identified your issue. Now you need to identify what person or entity can actually move change on your issue. So that could be an elected official, a committee chair, department head. But in other words, this is just the person with the pen, like the one who can say yes or no, or somewhere in between. I'd love to hear from y'all, like, what's one policy issue you care about right now, and who do you think holds power to make change on that? So if y'all want to drop your thoughts in the chat, that'd be really cool. Next slide, please. Okay, cool. So primary versus secondary targets. Primary targets are the actual decision makers. So this is the person who can cast a vote, sign a bill, or otherwise move your issue forward. So for example, I put here, like, if you're interested in a bill passing, the senator is the person who will vote on the bill. So that would be your target. your primary target. As far as secondary targets, they don't really have that power directly, but they can influence the primary target. And they're the people that your primary target respects or relies on, or they rely on them. So this could be a number of different things. For example, I put an advocacy group that a senator listens to. But this can also range from the senator's spouse or the senator's church members or pastor. Um, so it could be a wide range. There's a wide range of secondary targets. Are we good on the presentation, Kelly? I see in the chat folks can't see.
I think we're okay. It might be one person.
Okay, cool. All right. Next slide, please. Okay. So I just want to quickly do an overview of power mapping. Anyone heard of power mapping? Drop some emojis. I'm just going to give a really brief overview because this is a topic that you can get trained on for hours and hours. Very cool. I'm glad some of you have heard of this. Shout out to Louisiana chapter. They did a whole power mapping training earlier this year. But yeah, power mapping is essentially a visual tool that identifies the best individual to target to promote a positive outcome on your issue. So I put these two maps here because I want to show you that there are a lot of different ways to create a power map, but they all essentially do the same thing. So the one on the left is a very simple power map. On the axes, you'll see one, it says stance on issue from support to oppose, and then says amount of power. So are they very powerful or are they not powerful at all? So you want to map out who your policy targets are on a power map, and then you choosing your target by deciding who has the most power and who's most likely to move forward on your ask. But a lot of times we run into, as you all know, we run into folks who have a lot of power who don't agree with our issues. So we still want to move those people as well. But creating a power map will help you decide who's on your side and ways that we need to move them um, to agree with our ask. Um, on the right is a power map that PW1 has used. It's a lot more intricate than the one on the left, but essentially it does the same thing. So if you look at the axes, one says, can't even see, it's so small. But one of the axes says die hard as far as support, and then it goes down to less support. And then these different bubbles and things will decide like who's on who your policy targets are as people, any other organizations. Um, and there's a legend for this as well. I think Kelly said that she will send this out, which I think would be super cool. But this is just another way to do this. But essentially, your power map is just saying to you, who are the who are who are my policy targets and where on a scale are they, which will determine how you move forward, trying to move them. Next slide, please. Okay, so back to the primary and secondary targets. These are some primary and secondary visual tools. So this tool comes in handy after you've done the first step of identifying who your policy target is. And there's no right or wrong way to do this either. So I put two examples here. On the left, the powerful person is in the middle, and then all around are all the things that influence them. I think the best way to think about this is to think about yourself. So if you're a powerful person, which we all are, think about what influences you and what or who you have influence over in your circle. So for me, I am myself. I think I have influence over my friends, my family, a book club that I'm in, my coworkers, um, PWN in general. Like these are the things that are encompassing me as a person. And these are the things that you're thinking about when you're thinking about your policy target because they are a person and they do have these networks and they have people and networks around them that highly influence how they make decisions. Um, so you want to make sure you know who to move around as your secondary targets to be able to influence um, the primary target. So on the left, it just lists some relationships, maybe where the person went to school is a factor. Maybe some of the philanthropy is a factor. But I put another one on the right, which uses a similar chart style. But I just wanted to explain the arrows. So this is another concept where you're just mapping out who the policy target is, saying what the other relationships are around them, but the arrows decide if the policy target is influencing them or they're influencing the policy target. So you also want to know that, like, what type of relationship is this? Is it give and take? Are we looking at the most influential relationships in order to move those secondary targets to try to push more influence on the primary target? Next slide, please. Um, cool. Researching your policy target. Now that we've named our policy target, the next step is to research them. So you want to think like you're creating a strategy, like who holds the power, who really holds the power, what drives them. You want to ask questions like the ones that are listed here. You want to look at their personal and professional background. Where have they worked? What boards were they on? Or what advisory roles have they had? What are their affiliations? As far as political context, like what committees do they sit on? Are they in party leadership? What are their legislative priorities? You can also look at your legislators' voting records. How have they voted on past and current issues that relate to your issue or your ask? And campaign support is also a good one. A lot of times we've seen recently, like a lot of different organizations that are supporting things that are against our issues. For example, like Target going against the DEI, and then they're resulting in like a boycott. So that's an example of influence that we can have on people who support certain campaigns. But you also want to think like who helped elect your policy target? Who has donated to their campaign? And as far as the local dynamics, like what's going on in their district? What industries have an influence? What colleges or communities really shape their district? Next slide, please. And as far as researching um, the policy target, you can start simple, like just go right on Google and get some background information. Then you should move to some official sources like the legislator's personal website, or can use house.gov or senate.gov and check their committees, check their caucuses, check their recent press releases to see what they prioritize. You can also review their voting record on your issue. You can use that, you can do that through their personal website, which is not always encompassing all things that they voted on. But what will always have the votes is congress.gov or govtrack.us. Also, if you don't see something on the website, or you want quicker access, give the office a call. The staffers have a lot of information and they're willing to share that with you as well. I know I also mentioned scorecards. So if you've heard of these, drop an emoji. These are tools that advocate groups use to compile a politician's voting record on specific issues to show how they stand on a particular set of topics. So PWM, for example, if we created scorecards, which we don't, um, we would prioritize our legislators based on how they um, seem to vote on our issues, on the issues in our policy agenda. So think about your issue and think about what other issues your policymaker is voting on that could influence how they vote on your issue. But organizations create these scorecards to evaluate lawmakers' performance based on their agenda. So that could be how they vote on legislation, if they're co-sponsoring bills, and if they support specific policy priorities. And they're used to inform members of a group how the policy target is voting, and they're also used to hold politicians accountable and to advocate. Scorecards also consider factors like committee votes and even a legislator's engagement with the organization itself. Next thing you want to do is follow the money. You can see who has donated to campaigns and what industries support them. There's websites like opensecrets.org, Little Sis, I think Helena dropped in the chat, that can tell you where they got all their money from, and that can be a good deciding factor as to where they lean on certain issues. But you really just overall want to ask yourself, who helped elect this person? Who influences them personally? And also, which media outlets back them? Because that's also very telling. We have a polarized media that can be very one way or the other, and posing as neutral. So you want to see which outlets are backing them as well. But the goal is not to just gather facts. Like, we're not here to just figure out what church they go to and what school they go to and how much money they got. Like, we're using these facts to spot leverage points. So if you know a target's values or their donors and connections, that's what really helps you craft the messages that will resonate and move them on your issue. All right. And I think I'm passing it to Barb now.
Great. Thanks, Sallie. That was so helpful to think about the targets and how we can research them and find out information. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about two things. First is going to be talking about an inside versus an outside strategy. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in just a minute. And then I'm also going to talk about building relationships with elected officials. And when we're talking about building relationships with elected officials, I always like to start by saying that these are just people that are in our community. It's a good reminder for me because sometimes I can get a little intimidated and overwhelmed by thinking, that I'm going to reach out to people or call and talk to them, and why would they want to know about anything that we have to say? But the reality is that they are elected to represent us. and to bring what is important to us forward. And so just hold that in your mind a little bit as we're going forward. Why don't we go ahead and actually go to the next slide, because this is a little bit of a reminder. So when we're talking about campaigns and tactics, I just also like to have a little bit of a reminder that a campaign is a whole long plan. So that is going to have several different activities, how you're going to move an issue that you have identified that matters to you, and how you're going to convince the policy target that you have identified to actually listen to you and to make changes as you've identified. A tactic is a specific activity. And so I'm going to be talking mostly about tactics today. And you can go ahead and you can form many of these into a campaign that is going to help accomplish what your goal is around the issue that you've identified. So just like to lift that up, because sometimes when we're thinking about what we want to do and what's an insider strategy, what's an outsider strategy, we get a little bit confused, and we think, well, is this a tactic, is this a single event, or is this a campaign? When we're talking about insider versus outsider tactics, that can be a part of a campaign. And it is really useful because the more tactics and the different tactics that you use, the more effective you actually can be when you're trying to move specific issues and convince certain political targets. So next slide, please. So when we're talking about outsider strategies, these are strategies that oftentimes people think are utilized when you don't have power or you don't have access. I don't actually agree with that definition. I instead think that an outsider strategy is something that is external, that can be very compelling to people in the general public, that is a way that perhaps folks who are not aware of what your campaign issue is or why it is so important to them, it is a way to bring people along, to educate. And so when we talk about outsider strategies, we are talking about things like protest and public mobilization. The pictures here are from the PEPFAR rally that I know a number of you who are on this call were able to participate in. That was in September, and it was very, very specific. And I'm just going to go ahead and highlight a little bit about the issue and the policy target, just since that was something that Sallie went ahead and talked about. So when we're talking about the PEPFAR rally that happened in Washington, D.C. in September, early in September, we were specifically lifting up the issue that PEPFAR funding was not being released, and that the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget Director vote was not releasing those funds. So we had a very specific policy target, which is that we were targeting vote, and we had an issue, and that was, we were able to mobilize about this, and we brought a large amount of information to it because we had a number of incredible activists that were willing to sit in the street and raise up concerns about PEPFAR, which is the global funding for people with AIDS. And so the fact that this was not being funded, even though the congressional budget had included it, was really problematic. And so by holding this mobilization and this protest and this rally, we were not only able to put pressure on the Office on Management and Budget and the director, who was our specific target, but we were also able to share this information with people who perhaps had heard about it, but didn't know why it was so powerful. And so when I say that I think that outsider strategies can be very, very powerful, they certainly can, because they are educational strategies. They are often a chance to get out in the streets and yell. I don't know about you all, but when I think about politics, I get a little pissed off. Okay, I get a lot pissed off. And so being able to march down the street, screaming at the top of my lungs, letting my outrage vent and be heard, feels kind of pretty good for my heart, and it does me some good. And so when we talk about this strategy, it can be very, very powerful. Oftentimes it has it has some senses of humor attached to it, or it can be a direct outrage. Has a lot of emotion attached to it. And we want it to be emotional because emotion is how we are able to gather people in and help them understand why something that they might not think is important to them is really important. You can also, other outsider strategies can be media campaigns where you're writing letters to the editor or you're lifting up social media. And then again, with the education and engagement, petitions and boycotts. So this is a very effective strategy when you have a group of people who are all feeling really strongly about something, when you are wanting to educate people, and when you're wanting to just get out and get some emotion out. So are there other outsider strategies maybe that I didn't list here that anybody has used that you want to put in the chat that you want to talk about? I would love to hear some other outsider strategies, perhaps that I didn't list here. And I'm just going to thank Rebecca for adding in the comments that a lot of times public demonstrations can feel really good for women or people who live in feminine bodies because we are often silenced, ignored, or made to feel very unsafe when we are expressing anger, frustration, or a sense of outrage. And so being a part of a large group is a perfect opportunity to be able to lift that up and to really talk about it. So thank you all so much. Yes, Kelly, thank you. Bird dogging is an outsider strategy as well. So this is something where you do not need to have access. When somebody says, I'm confused about insider versus outsider strategies, pretty much the best way to think about it is, did you need to call up and make an appointment? Or do you have this, or did you have to RSVP to it? If you didn't, that's pretty much an outsider strategy where you're able to gather together folks. So looks like, yeah, we have some good outsider strategies here. Absolutely. Showing up at Home Depot, protecting our community from ICE, blowing whistles or following along on your bike or your car, letting people know that ICE is in the vicinity. These are all incredible, incredible examples of outsider strategies. Like I said, people talk outsider strategies down because they think that it's when people are not powerful. I think that as a community member, it is some of the most powerful and productive times that I've had. Let's go to insider strategies. Insider strategies are ones that are a little bit different. And this is where we are very intentionally going to our policy target and we are making appointments and we are lifting ourselves up as subject matter experts. We are talking to them about impacts of the laws that they're voting and discussing on in our very own community that maybe perhaps even though, for example, representatives come from our area, but they might not know that much about people living with HIV. The number of times that I've gone to meet with a representative or even a senator and they say, well, you know, you're the first person I've ever met who's living with HIV. And I'm always very clear to say, I am the first person that you've met that has been willing to share my status with you. You've known other people, but they just haven't felt safe. And I think that that is important because as always, when we talk about the work that we do, we need to make sure that we're drawing connections around stigma and how we seize our power, not how power is given to us, but how we seize our power. So the lobbying officials, the in-district meetings, the town halls, we have some great pictures here of some of our PWN members at AIDS Watch when they met with some of the representatives from Alabama. But I also think that we need to lift up as an insider organizing strategy other places where perhaps we're not targeting an elected official, but instead might be targeting a commissioner, a governor, or someone else. And they oftentimes are most influenced by these other places where we show up, which is where policy making happens, testifying at a committee hearing around legislation, providing technical and policy analysis, helping to draft legislation. That is all so important when we're talking about insider information or providing information and having it be expert based. You all know that one of my favorite things to say is that we are the experts of our lives. That we, as people who are living with HIV and impacted by HIV, we are the subject matter experts, and we must demand that we be treated with that expertise and have that honored. The picture on the bottom is actually when we were at one of the federal AIDS policy partnership calls or meetings in Washington, D.C. And the folks around the table here are the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus. And so they are lifting up our subject matter expertise, our understanding of the unique impact in our communities and in our lives. So again, when we're talking about insider, this is often seen as being through formal strategies, and people think that if you can make an appointment and get somebody to see you, that is an extra powerful way to be. I disagree. I think that you actually want to do both strategies. So when we're talking about a campaign and how you blend these all together, the most important part is that you want to believe in a both and approach, not an either or. And sometimes people feel comfortable with one, but not with another, and that's fine. I personally love both of them, and I consider myself, I go undercover when I'm doing my insider strategies, like, ooh, you don't know that I am an agitator and that I have been arrested and dragged out of the Senate, which brings me great joy to be able to do that. But now I'm here talking to you, and you don't know. You don't know who I am. I'm going to tell you what you need to know, and I'm going to share with you my analysis around the impact of, for example, the HR1 and the horrible impact that it's going to have on Medicaid in Colorado. I'm going to share that with you. And I'm not going to say that, I was just outside waving signs and screaming and yelling. So as I go through all of these strategies, it's really important for people to take a moment, to take a pause, and to think about what you feel comfortable with. There are some people who just want to be outside waving signs. There are some people who just want to be meeting with folks. There are some people who want to do both. It is all important. It is all helpful, and it's all so critical. So whatever feels good to you, whatever you can do is valid and important. And so we want to go ahead and make sure that we talk about all of these strategies, all of these tactics in kind of equal light so that they all have validity and all feel very important. I'm going to go ahead and stop there and see if anybody has any. Oh, we're getting questions later. Sorry. Looks like I'm just reading along. Yes, we have gorgeous folks that are here. Look at that. All right. I'm going to go ahead and go to my next slide then. We're going to move along and we're going to talk about building and maintaining relationships with elected officials. This is a photograph of when we were actually lying down in the hall in 2017, protesting the proposed repeal of the Affordable Care Act, because we knew the people living with HIV were going to die if that got repealed. I put this picture up just as a reminder that building relationships can be the entire continuum, from talking to people to being arrested and dragged out. Oftentimes, we want to make sure that the tactic we're using is appropriate for what we're trying to accomplish. So if I want them to hear me as a subject matter expert, I'm not going to get up off of the floor here and then go in and talk to them. Here, I am a constituent who is directly impacted. I'm outraged, I'm disappointed, and I'm also really disgusted. And that is the role that I'm playing. So again, as you're getting involved in tactics, sometimes people really forget to say, what is our goal? What are we hoping to accomplish? And how do we need to show up? Those are questions you should ask yourself before you do any of these tactics, so that you're clear with what you're comfortable with and what you perhaps are not comfortable with, so that if it happens, you need to remove yourself. So yes, this kind of protest here is not the beginning of a meaningful relationship. This is after many, many, many months of trying to have meetings and to talk to Senator Gardner from Colorado, who refused to meet with us, refused to do town halls, kind of a little bit of what we're seeing now. And so this was the way that we got his attention. And we were able to, we were able to at the very least get a lot of attention as we talked about what demonstrations and rallies are for. We got a lot of public exposure. We had a lot of people who understood what we were so upset about. Next slide. So when you're talking about building relationships, let's start from the beginning and go all the way through. I like this picture of these two so much, I put it in twice. How about that? So when you're getting started to build a relationship, and Sallie mentioned a lot of this actually already, you want to just do some basic research. Okay. And Sallie is, when we're talking about ways that you can do research and listed off a number of things, put them here as well, just as a reminder. If you are not signed up for your representative and your senator's newsletter, even if you don't agree with their policies, it is super important to do that, because that's how you find out if they're going to hold a town hall, if they're going to have a phone call, or, where they might be showing up. You want to learn as much about them as possible. There are lots of traditional ways, which is where they get their money from. I actually really go undercover and I do a lot of research on Facebook or other social media, primarily because it tells me not only kind of what their politics are, but it also tells me who they are as a person. I also am I'm older, I'm an elder, I'm seasoned. I've lived in Boulder a long time. And so what I've learned is that I can go back to the people that I went to high school with, who oftentimes know these people or have taught them in school. And I will go and I will ask what they were like in high school. And so I get all the dirt about who was well behaved and who perhaps misused the bathroom passes. I don't ever say it, but it does give me a little bit of, first off, it gives me a little bit of a grin if they're being a jerk. It helps me kind of realize that people are just people, and that sometimes things don't change too much. But so going back to the more traditional ways, though, you also can see how they stand on issues. A lot of times people have written letters to the editor or have posted something on TikTok where they're talking about why they believe something is important. This is really, really helpful, not just what their position is, but the why behind it. Because if we understand the why behind it, then we can start thinking about where we can convince them what we might want to change. We had a representative on the Western Slope in Colorado who was a Republican. And I would go, actually, I really enjoyed going to meet him on our office visits, primarily because he was a fiscal conservative. And so from knowing and talking to him over the years and talking to people who knew him, I knew that if I could make a good financial argument, that I could convince him. And so when I was in talking about the number of people who were going to be diagnosed with HIV in his district, I talked about how expensive it was if somebody had to live a long lifetime with HIV versus how much PrEP would cost. And that was a very convincing argument. And that person actually ended up kind of asking a lot of questions on the floor about why prevention funding was being cut. This was a Republican. So when we have those conversations, I didn't bother talking to him about stigma or discrimination or what it felt like being a person living with HIV, but I did talk to him about dollars and cents and how that was going to impact people in his district. And that was really helpful. We also talk about how they voted, what their political philosophy is. It is really fascinating when we have a lot of folks who have perhaps moved from the center to become more conservative. And a lot of times people are very curious about that. And so you'll notice in a lot of local newspapers, folks are writing about that, and then reading up on that is always really, really helpful. Then we talk about, not assuming what their position is, and that goes back to Scott Tipton, who was the representative, the first time I went in, I went in just with my hair on fire. And if you all have seen that, it is a frightful, frightful thing. But I was just like, you're a jerk, and I'm going to tell you why people living in your district don't deserve to be treated badly by you. And it was bad. It was bad. And then I stopped and I took a pause and I was like, oh, wait, maybe I should ask, what you know about HIV and what your position is. And it turned out actually that he was somewhat sympathetic. And so, again, you know what they say about assuming things. And I proved that point of quite a lot with that, but, was then able to, and here's the thing is that we are just human beings as well. And so we make mistakes. And I apologized. I said, I'm really sorry. I made an assumption and I'd like to revise my assumption. And so tell me what you think. And it turned out to be a really good conversation. So again, when we're thinking about it, don't always just think that you know what they're going to believe, because sometimes we're proven wrong, and it's quite an interesting and unique thing to look at and to try and understand why. All right, next slide. Oh my goodness. I think that some of my pictures did not copy over. Okay. Yeah, well, we're going to see Marcia and Katie quite a bit because it looks like my pictures didn't copy over, so that's fine. So again, as we prepare yourself, make sure that they know that you're a constituent. If you're a constituent, it gives you extra weight and gravitas because you know what is going to happen in their district. Because you have lived there, you have tried to receive services, and so that's always the first thing out of my mouth when I'm talking to anyone is that I live in your district. If you don't live in their district, then I kind of think about a connection I have with their district. So it could be I provide services for people in your district. And that's easy because in Colorado, we provide services for everyone across the state. And so I can call any representative and tell them that I serve people living in their district. And that is correct and true. Make sure you know your issue. You don't need to know every little nitty gritty talking point, but you do want to make sure that you know a little bit about the impact and how it's going to actually go ahead and reflect on people living with HIV in their area or people who are vulnerable to acquiring HIV. A lot of times it's easy for us to go to meetings with the elected officials and we get caught up in our story. And a little part of our story is helpful. But I wouldn't start off with, I was first diagnosed living with HIV in 1991. There was an assumption that women did not actually get diagnosed with HIV, but we know that women were dying of HIV. Like when I want to really go into my full story, I need about a good 2 hours. We don't have that kind of time. And so think about your issue and think about what part of your personal story highlights that particular issue. If you're talking about housing, talk about how difficult it was to find housing, or if you were stigmatized in a housing setting. If you're talking about healthcare, talk about your most recent example of when you weren't able to access the healthcare that you needed. So that's the story that highlights your point. Just a little snippet of it. It doesn't need to be the very, very detailed version of it. And we know our stories are powerful. And that is part of what we can bring that a lot of times other folks aren't able to do, is to have the stories with our lived experience. Be specific. It is easy to say, I'm here to talk to you about healthcare in Colorado, or I'm here to talk to you about healthcare in Alabama. But what's better is to say, I'm here to talk to you about healthcare in Colorado and the 200,000 people who are going to lose access because of HR1 that you voted for. And I want to know what you're going to do to make sure that people don't lose that care. That's specific. Make the connection personal. You might not like the person you're talking to. We talked to some real garbage individuals when we're talking to elected officials. Still, we have to treat them with respect because they are elected. It doesn't mean you have to like them. It doesn't mean anything. It just does mean that you need to treat them with respect, and because they are representing at least part of the population. And then the other part is follow up after the meeting. A lot of times people don't do this. Send them an email saying you appreciated talking to them. If you promised that you would send any materials on, do that. But you want them to start thinking of you as their contact, as their insider information person, because you're going to keep coming back to them. Next slide, Kel. Continue the connection, okay? You want to develop the relationship. You want to congratulate them and thank them for positive votes, not just scolding them for when they are mistaken and make a lousy vote. You want to share articles about your issue, and you want to make sure that you invite them to events when they're back in district. Sometimes they even surprise you and they come, which is always really wonderful. So I put in a snippet here from my Facebook account. I unabashedly cheerlead for our folks. And the reason why I do that is because I want them to know that I'm following along, and I will hold them accountable if they are voting in ways that I don't think is helpful. But if they do something that I feel is good, I make sure, and this is part of the reason why I stay on Facebook, because it's horrible and a garbage pit. But I want to be able to send a message. You see that I tagged my representative here in it so that he knew I was watching and I knew what he was doing. So that is a really important thing to figure out how you can do that. And we've talked about elected officials running the entire gamut, from fabulous to really pretty terrible. So again, this is something that you need to sit with yourself and think about how you want to show up. And it can change, but the options, there's a vast range of options. Kind of just jotting a few down. You can be the relentless cheerleader. You can see here from this that this is me cheering him on. He was talking for a long time. I wanted him to know I was watching and that I appreciated it. And so I was just like, rah, you're doing great. I have sent other Facebook messages where I feel like he has not voted appropriately, that have been a little bit crankier, or have been checking facts that he mentioned that were not correct. This is something that you can find pretty easily. And it is, again, about building that relationship, because you want to be the person that now, when you're hopping on calls with a number of our federal partners and you're there representing community, that the person who is in the representative or the senator's office recognizes you from conversations or from emails and messages. So that's how you continue the connection. Next slide. All right, here we go. So maybe they messed up. Actually, most likely they messed up. You want to hold them accountable, and you want to make sure that they know that you see what they have done. And so I am always really interested in showing up at rallies and seeing who is holding our representatives who voted for HR 1, who's holding them accountable. And it's starting to be more and more popular. People are starting to say, Representative Evans, you voted for HR 1, and we're starting to see that folks in Planned Parenthood can't get services. 1,000 people in 2 months weren't able to receive services. Those are showing up on signs. That's holding them accountable. And we're seeing a number of events, and these are really important to go to, because while the vote is finished, we want to make sure that they know that we remember and that we are educating people that they had this particular vote that is really problematic, so that the Medicaid, using the same example about people who couldn't access services at Planned Parenthood because of HR1. That didn't just happen out of the blue. That just wasn't something that just all of a sudden happened with nobody having a responsibility for it. We're holding him accountable for that. So accountability is really important. This funeral that we did, it was in front of his office, and he was there. And so I like to think at some point in time that he got to see us unceremoniously stuffing the cardboard cutout of him into the hearse and then walking along the street in front of his office as if we were a funeral procession, because we were. And so these kinds of things are how we share both what we know is important, but also how we are able to share how it impacts us. We are complete people. We are complete human beings. And so disgust, despair, frustration, sadness, anger, all of that is really important to be able to figure out how you're going to share that also. Last slide. So as we said, we are whole people. And I don't know if you all can see this or not, but I always feel like you should take a moment to sit on a teeter-totter. That's Kelly at the other end there, to just have a little bit of joy and laughter. Pay attention. We're also courageous, and take care of yourself, because unfortunately, our relationships with these elected officials are hard. And they're so important. And I'll go ahead and I'll just stop there.
All right. Thank you so much, Barb. Thank you so much, Sallie. That was right on point, and it's really going to help me in my advocacy work, especially with the elected officials that I have. I'm in a very red area, and sometimes it seems like they're just impossible to get to. But enough about me right now. We're going to take some questions. Let me see. And let's see, does anybody have any questions? I don't see any hands raised. Or can I just not see them? Yeah. Or questions, comments? Well, all right, ladies, y'all did so well. Look, it seems like nobody has questions for you.
I have a
The
question.
information, I think the information that both of you provided was absolutely phenomenal. And just, I mean, look at the comments. Incredible
It was.
presentation. I mean, it's what's understood need not be explained. And I think y'all did a great job, as y'all always do. And for me, I learned a lot. I really did. Thanks.
I did too. Yes, it will definitely help me when dealing with my legislators. It really will.
Kelly's
Because
hand
Also,
is up,
just wants to say fabulous words.
and so is Sarah's.
Is
yes.
it okay to jump in and ask a question? Or
Yes.
write it in the comment?
Okay.
We have hands up.
Oh, sorry.
I don't see the hands. I don't see any
okay.
hands.
That's okay.
Kelly,
I
could you
can
help me out? I'm not seeing.
That's okay. I can help here. I saw Miss Sarah's hand, and then Aaron, we'll pass it over to you right after.
Okay, let me see what the hands are.
I want to thank you all so much, because this will help me a whole lot. Since I'm the policy coordinator for PWN Louisiana, this will help me a whole lot with these people in office. Thank y'all.
Beautiful.
All right. Thank you, Miss Jackson.
All right. Aaron, over to you.
Can you hear me? Hello?
We got you.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, I just want to say thank you. This is really well done. It's a great breakdown of a lot of things that people don't really clearly understand that their tax money is going to. That makes sense. My question is really more about collaboration and like follow up. My issue is more about child abuse and how it's not really addressed properly in the family court system reform. But it's really under the same lens that we all want reform and we all want protection and we all want power and we all want equality. So is there a way that we can collaborate?
Yeah, I think Sallie or Barb, if either of you have a response.
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of times we come up with an issue and obviously we just want someone to agree 100% on our issue. But oftentimes it takes baby steps to get there. So to me, that's what you're saying is collaboration. Like, how can we work together to get to my goal?
Yeah.
You may not be able to meet me where I'm at right now, but there's an opportunity here for us to learn from each other. I can understand or try to understand the things that are important to you, and you can understand the things that are important to me, and we can make baby steps in the right direction. I think that that's important to hold on to as you're doing policy work and advocacy work, because a lot of times if you're getting a maybe, it could feel like a no. Or if you're getting 1/8 of what you asked for, it could feel like a no. But we should be honestly celebrating every small step forward. Because a lot of times our issues are very large and they're intricate, and there are a lot of people that have their hands in it. So even getting a small step towards our issue, I think should be seen as a win. So 100% would say that you should see this as a collaboration with your legislator. Work with them so that they'll work with you. If they can't give you a full hard yes, always stick to your goal. Never back down on your ultimate goal, but definitely work with them to make progress on your goal.
That's great advice. I appreciate it. So my background is in behavioral analysis, and we're trained to believe that everything kind of boils down into 4 functions. And I think that training has allowed me to see that human rights, there's really no segregation in human rights. It's either you're in or you're out, if that makes sense. And I see our government right now as a monetizing scheme and just looking for public puppets to use to further monetize their current power through money. If that
Thank you.
helps or resonates.
Yes, it does. It really does. I see 2 hands raised, and I cannot distinguish who raised their hands first. That's Susan and Marcia.
Hey, it doesn't matter. Hi, Marcia. Yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, hi. Hey, maybe I think Sallie and Barb, I think Sallie, one of mine is for you. I think you maybe already answered me, but I wondered a couple things more about you used the coolest term that I know I want to learn more about. Are leveraging as a tactic, like finding the soft spot in the person that we're going to. Now, do you mean that in the sense of where we can see we're breaking through and they want to know more about what we're telling them, for example, about criminalization in Pennsylvania that they didn't even know about, for example? Is that what you mean? Or yeah, I'll just stop there. Is that what you meant or no?
That certainly works. What I meant more so was that when you're creating a map of the primary targets, secondary targets, those are your leverage points. Like, we're not doing this research to just say, this is the church, this is the golf club, this is whatever, like we're doing that, and then you're deciding, now where can I fit in to have influence based on these secondary targets. So when you're doing your research, what you're really looking for is those leverage points where you can use what you know about them to influence their decision.
Perfect.
Okay. I think next is Marcia.
And really, that's the reason why I let Susan go first is because mine is not really a question. I just wanted to say thank you. That was really, really good. These are always when I'm getting off work, so I'm driving, and I'm going to want to watch this one probably 2 or 3 times because I want to take notes. So, thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Marcia. Yes, it has given me a lot of hope, y'all, because my legislators, they are very elusive, and they practically do they feel as though they can do just what they want to do, you know. And a lot of people here in this area, they say nothing's going to change, so they're not even trying. They're not even putting up a fight. It seems, so it gives me a lot of hope. So, okay, are there any more hands raised that I don't see, or any more questions or comments?
I have a question.
Okay.
Awesome. So I've been doing a little chatting during this presentation with some folks. And one of the questions that came up was around how different offices are staffed and how we can be strategic about where we're doing outreach. And specifically there, right, we're talking about district offices versus DC offices. So Barb, you showed the picture of like rolling up to the DC office, laying down, doing a planned arrest. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, like, are there strategic considerations about when you work with a district office versus when you work with a DC office?
That is such a great question. I prefer to work with the in-district office. So for folks who might not know what that term is, that's the office that's back home in my area. And the reason why I do that is that whether the elected official is there or not, those folks are in the office. And so I, especially early on in someone's perhaps term, or when they're newly elected, or just because I'm there, I walk in and introduce myself and tell them that I'm going to be talking to them about a whole bunch of different things. And then and I always, y'all, I am not the best at remembering names. And so what I do is as soon as I leave, I write down their names and a little bit of a description so that I can remember who they are, because the elected officials are going to have these same people staffing tables at the farmers market and at the state fair and at all of these other things. And so I go up to them and I remember their name because I've got it written in my phone. And I'm like, oh, look, it's Alicia. Alicia, hi, it's so good to see you. I saw you, 2 weeks ago at the office. And we talked about healthcare, and it's good to see you. How are you doing? Do you need a Coke or anything? Can I bring you anything? And they're always like, no, no, no. But building a relationship with an elected official and their staff is like building a relationship with a friend. People like to be remembered by their name. It helps to have short visits that you do for just a little bit. And oftentimes people will go from the in-district office, they'll get promoted to the office in Washington, D.C. And so when you walk in and you see somebody that you know back from being in district, it's great to be able to know that you've built a relationship with them before. So Washington, D.C., everyone is always trying to get people's attention in Washington, D.C. Back in district, not so much. not so much. And so when we're doing our calls, like our 5 calls of talking about a particular topic, I make sure that I call the in-district office as well to make sure that it's not just Washington, D.C., but it's back home, because if we want them to feel accountable to us, we need them to know that we know where their office is, not in a threatening way, but that we know where their office is so that we can drop in and say hi, that when the representative is there, that they're more likely to actually schedule a meeting with us, with him, because they know that we're persistent and that we're going to keep showing up. And then we've got something important to say, that we're not, just kind of there because we want to get brownie points for having pictures with elected officials, but that's it. I will, every once in a while, like if there's something that's important, like I'll make the 5 calls and I'll talk to the people in Washington, D.C., but I will keep the lead hot with the people, especially that I've connected to in the Washington, D.C. office, if they are the staffer that is working on the issues that I'm most concerned about. So if we want to talk about HOPWA, for example, we want to talk to the person who is the labor and housing staffer. We want to talk about Ryan White, then we want to talk about the healthcare person. So it is helpful to know these things. And again, if you're terrible with names like I am, no shame, write yourself a note, put it in your phone. I text it to myself so I can find it really easily. And then I am able to call people by name and remember what we talked about. So thanks, Kel. That was a great question.
Yes, it was. I do that same thing. I will text messages to myself and go back and check them. So, okay. Now for any closing thoughts. We have one, I saw a message come through that they really enjoyed the webinar coming from that Catherine. So, and I really enjoyed it too. It did. It gave me some insight and some new ways to try to engage with Adderhope. So, yeah.
I would love to hear if maybe Barb and Sallie have any thoughts that they want to leave the folks in the room with.
Okay.
Sure. First, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to be here in the space with you all. Really, I would say, in terms of today's topic, it's important now, more than ever, for us to really be intentional about how we're building relationships with our legislators. And that starts with the research, and that starts with some of those secondary targets. We can't always get to our legislator right away. As y'all know, a lot of times you can get the staffers or wherever. So use these tools and really map out how to have the greatest impact on the folks who have the power to say yes, to think that you want them to say yes to. But yeah, I hope that you all take all of this and run fast with it.
That is so great, Sallie. Yeah, mine is, I got a little hung up talking about treating people with respect, and really what I meant by that is that we want to treat people like human beings, because while we might have differences of opinions and they are really serious and critical, the most important part is that while they might be a senator, while they might be a representative, that they ultimately are a human being, someone who hopefully we can connect to in a way that is meaningful, that is able to share what's so important for us. Because again, far too often they're hearing from the aid service organizations and the health departments, and what they really need to do is they really need to be hearing from us, people in their communities who are living with HIV or impacted by HIV, because we ultimately know what the impact of the programming is. But more importantly, we know the stories and we know the people that are directly affected. So again, I just want to go back to my reminder, take care of your precious self. This work is hard, and right now especially, there is a lot of chaos and churn and confusion that's going on. That is the purpose of the chaos, is that they want to exhaust us and lead us into despair. So take a break if you need to, find a teeter-totter. Hopefully you can find a teeter-totter with Kelly on the other end of it, because that was one of my high points of the year. But most importantly, take care of yourself, because we're in this together and we need all of us, to bring forward our own unique points and our voice. So I'll just stop there.
All right. Thank y'all, ladies, so much once again for everything you do and this wonderful presentation that you had for us today. And now, we have a call to action. We need each and every one of you to urge Congress to pass bipartisan spending bills. And you can click the QR code. It's the Save HIV funding, and use the HIV funding call script to urge them to pass this bill to ensure access to health care. And when you click the link, you're going to get the script. If you don't know who your Congress people are, there will be a number to a line that will direct you to your legislator. And so, and share this information with your friends, with your family. You know, people that you see at your local clinic and at your ASOs. You know, because this is important. The government has been shut down for about 4 weeks now. Has it been 4 weeks yet? It's right at, it's been a minute, and things are going to start getting kind of scary for a lot of people. So they really need to reopen the government. So if if you would, the sooner the better. Click the QR code and use the Save HIV funding call script to urge our Congress people to pass the bipartisan spending that will ensure access to health care. And we all need affordable health care. Okay. Join us for our next webinar, Getting Ready for Legislative Sessions, Understanding Calendars, Processes, and Timelines. And that's going to be November the 20th of 2025. So get ready, get ready, get ready. We're going to have another great webinar. Please connect with us on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And once again, thank our facilitators today that came on and did wonderful presentations. My co-coordinator, Kelly Flannery, she's the best. And other members from the PWN staff that I can't see right now. But thank y'all for showing up once again and showing out. There you go. Thank you. Well, put them out there where I can see them. But thank everybody for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again next month for our webinar. So until we meet again, be blessed.